Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining me on the Slice of Finance podcast. I'm your host, Jared Taylor. Joining me today is the co-founder and CEO of Parallel, and this is Renato Villanueva. How's it going?
Good, man. Excited to be here.
Excited to have you. Let's first dive right in with a maybe a question you didn't expect. Why did you want to start a company in the first place? That's often what we get asked as founders, right? People
Yeah.
that aren't also founders, they say, "Why would you do this to yourself?"
Yeah, I think there's something about like building that's just a lot of fun. It's like so challenging, it's so difficult, but there's like nothing more satisfying than solving like a really tough problem. And at Divi, getting to experience that like over and over and over again in the 5 years that we were there and just constantly hitting the targets, whether it was like, now we broke 500K in ARR, 1 million and 10 million and 50 million and 100 million. And it's just like one of those things that like it kind of hit after the acquisition, things like slowed down a little bit and the problems just changed. And I wanted to get back into like that very early stage. But even from like my days early at Qualtrics, when I was an SDR there and I got a chance to see like Ryan Smith leading a company meeting, it's probably nonsensical to think about it, but at the time I'm like, oh man, I think I could do that. Like, I think I would have the ability to like lead a team towards something, and kind of had similar thoughts when I'd see Blake up at company meetings and I'd be like, man, like, I think that there'll come a time when I think I can do that. And so as things at Divi were like, after the acquisition were slowing down and I wanted to go back, it was like, the approach that we had taken to finance was pretty unique. And there was kind of this sort of like, people are always waiting for that right time of like, okay, once I find the perfect idea, well, then I'll quit. And it was just one of those things that I was like, you know what? I think I'm like as equipped as I'll ever be to go and fail over and over and over again. Cause that's like what this process is. It's like iterating, learning, you like get another piece of the puzzle. And so, yeah, like, I think it's just like this desire to, step into the shoes of people I admire and want to continue to build and work on tough problems.
I love it. And you are working on a tough problem, right? And one that's critical for you're in a business that's different from a lot of others because you're also helping other people that have businesses have better control over, what does their financial situation look like, right, with the company. What was that like? Talk me through that. Obviously, there was a bunch of different things that kind of led up to this point. What was that final, like, pivotal moment for you where you're like, that's it, I'm doing it?
We just had to follow where, to some extent, like where uh, it's like this process of like listening and being a detective. And so I was having a couple of founder friends who were like, hey, Renato, we know that your background's in finance. Do you have like a operating model in Excel that you could send my way? And I'd be like, yeah, for sure, man. Here you go. Here's the template I use. And the next question was always, can you help me fill it out? And, like, I want to help because so many people have helped me along the way. Like, when I think about the money we raised last year, I'm just like, man, that would not have happened without a few key people who just like cared, right? So I want to care. But at the same time, like, now I'm under like the time clock. I only have so much time to like give, right? And so I'd be like, I don't have time to help you fill it out. And so then like it would lead to like, well, how much would I have to pay you to fill it out? And I'm like, okay, well, that's a different question, because now, the lifeblood of my company is getting more money in. And so we kind of started like testing the waters. We're like, okay, there's not really been a forecasting platform that is really focused on founders in early stage. And so we kind of started selling it a little bit, and it was like, okay, like, we know that there's a clear appetite here and need. And there's also kind of been this like inflection point where historically capital efficiency just hasn't really mattered at this stage. And because of how much like investment has been pulled back, there's also this like influx of companies that are at like the seed stage, the seed plus, that need kind of like that CFO level insights to manage their runway in an effective way. And so, yeah, we decided to build something to kind of service that gap.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting because years ago when the investing environment was a bit different, right? Like, every company expected, as long as they were growing, it didn't necessarily matter. Like, things like spend were still monitored, right? But not to the same extent. And the words profitability over the last 10 years was really not like something, oh we need to figure out how to become profitable, right? And now you're hearing all these startups that we talk with. It's like our goal this year is to try to figure out profitability before the end of the year or early next year, right? And part of that is because they're planning on not being able to raise money, and that doesn't necessarily mean anything bad about the business. It's just kind of the environment that we're in. So that makes what you're building even more critical than it was. It was always critical, but even more so today. So really
Yeah,
interesting.
like it's kind of mattered, right?
Yeah.
Because Paul Graham has talked about like the fatal pinch, or whether excuse me, about whether you're like default alive or dead. So like these are not new concepts that you should like manage your burn, make sure you have enough runway to raise, but like that you have the traction to actually go and raise. But it's kind of like two things. It's like there's less capital being invested, and the bar has also been raised. Um, but I also like to think about like there's the way I've always viewed like my life is I've always like I can either save an extra, 5, 6K a year and not enjoy my weekends as much. Or I can find a way to make 10, 20 grand, like increase my earning potential. So like there's only so much I can cut back. Like the times that I've sat down and looked at my budget, I'm like, okay, I can't live without Netflix. Like I'm going to pay for Netflix. I'm going to pay for Spotify. I have to pay for my car insurance. So like it gets to a point where like you can't pull back anymore. And so like for me, my mind's always gone to like how can I make more money? And what we want our platform to do a lot is like, yes, there is this focus on profitability, but more so than that, we want to like empower founders to make big bets without doing like nonsensical spending. So it's like we want founders to come here because they want to go and spend more money. They want to place these bets. They want to like think about the future. And we just want to kind of be there to make sure that they're aware of like, okay, there's a high likelihood that this outcome can happen. And here's an example of a bet that you want to place that there's a low likelihood that it could happen. And here's what impact it would have if you decide to go through with it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I like that approach to basically empowering them to make more versus just straight cost cutting. There was actually, this was an old movie, but it was with Michael J. Fox where he's like an executive at a company, right? And they said we need to. There's about a hostile takeover about to happen of the company, and everyone at the company goes, "We need to cut costs as much as we can. We need to be lean and mean." He's like, "We need to make more money. We need to become more powerful, like in that sense, not like weaker by getting everything up." And that seems to be the path that a lot of people take. But part of that is they don't have a tool like yours that's helping them in terms of making those decisions. But I've always been a big fan too of it's not just about cost cutting. It's how do you end up making more more money so that you can continue to grow and do the right things. Because a lot of these expenses that people decide to cut in business are immaterial, right? Like that you cutting that $50 a month software that helps you a little bit is not going to magically improve the business. So what are the biggest mistakes? Because you obviously have insight to a lot of this stuff. Like, what are some of the biggest mistakes you've seen founders make from a financial perspective?
Yeah, I think like the creeping in of one-time expenses. So for example, like on paper, let's say it's like me and my co-founder, we're paying each other to make numbers easy. Let's say it's 120 each, so like 240K a year. And so like 20K per month, right? Add in like payroll taxes, Medicare, you're like, okay, on paper I'm spending 30 grand a month. And if I have 3 million dollars in the bank right now, it's like, I have just I have 100 months of runway or whatever, right? Like it's just this insane amount. Um, but like what I often like realize with a lot of the founders is like last month they paid 8K to their legal counsel because X thing came up. The month before that they had like some issue with their DevOps, and so they hired a contractor for 1 month, and that was 10 grand. And then the month before that they had another one-time expense, and so it's like, okay, yes, like on paper, if nothing happens, you are only burning 30K a month. Um, but because you've kept having these like one-off things come up, it's like your burn really is closer to 50K a month. It's like more than double. And so it's like funny to like kind of elucidate to a founder. It's like, hey, like if you don't spend anything or no surprises happen, like sure, you're alive for 14 months. But if the surprises that have been really common continue to happen, you're live for like 7. So like just like be aware of that. I'd also say the second thing is um like viewing every hire. I think a lot of founders want to like think one person can come and fix the company. And like I've even been guilty of it where it's like, maybe it's kind of because it is this hard thing where it's like, am I not selling because I suck at sales, or is it because the product sucks and the product's not ready, and or the idea sucks, right? And so sometimes it can be tempting to be like, okay, I'm gonna go hire an SDR, and and it'll be his responsibility to go and make cold outreach and get the top of funnel going. And so I think like the mistake that founders make is like thinking that they're one hire away from their company getting fixed. And so I think sometimes it's like what we'd want our product to kind of help them understand is, well, what is the bet that you're making with the people you're adding to the company? So it's like if you're hiring a sales rep, like what do you really think that they'll close? And why do you think that? How confident do you think about that? And so yeah, those are like the two mistakes is like the one-time expenses that creep in, and then also kind of expecting that someone can come in and fix it for you.
Yeah, I always see like with venture back companies, they get this money and then you see them immediately start growing the team. Like 20 jobs go up, right? And they're hiring all these people, but to like what you kind of said earlier, uh, but the money's not like the money's not immediately coming in to pay for all of these hires beyond what they have for the bank, right? And they end up hiring all these people, and then it seems like all these companies go down this cycle of they raise their money, they build out their team very quickly. Maybe they didn't figure out everything out in that time period, quick time period. Then they end up laying off. Then they get lean. They start growing again. They hire again. Then they like I've seen multiple cycles of certain companies go through these layoffs or how a lot of people call it the right sizing, right? It seems to be the new
Yeah.
term.
And that's like one of the things that like we kind of envision for the future of our product is kind of making sure that you're not seeing just like this graph that's like cash is decreasing and this is when you die, but that you see it like in context of like what you're aiming for. Meaning, okay, we want to raise our Series A with 6 months of runway left. So that's like next November, we'll say, and by next November, our revenue needs to be at this level to be at the level where raising won't be an issue. And so then like you work backwards. And what we'd love is like month after month to kind of inform, are we like on track to hit that or not? And I think that like as founders go and make additions and seeing what that does to the future, like if they add one more person because they're feeling pressure, it's just like, okay, just so you know, like now you're going to be raising your Series A at this level of revenue. And so you're going to have to start thinking about raising in February instead of April. And so it's just like kind of bringing in that context together that it's like, it's less about, it's like less reactionary, but it's like the entire picture of like, okay, I'm making this decision knowing that it's going to accelerate my fundraise by 3 months, that I'm going to be entering my fundraise with 20% less revenue than I hoped for. And so now like, let's say I was planning on entering fundraising for a Series A at 4 million in ARR. I'm entering it at 1.2 million. And it's like, and I have to like be okay with that. And I think that that's sometimes what we want to get, like what founders miss. It's just like the picture of what they're making, right? Is like, it's very reactionary and it's easy to be reactionary.
What I would love to see in your software at some point too, is almost like the iTunes. Are you sure you want to buy this?
Yeah.
Structure, like did you mean to buy this? And almost like when you're building a what if scenario, it would be kind of cool. Like you add 5 SDRs, right? And it's just a prompt why, right?
No, that's
Yeah,
like, that's exactly like we want every addition to within our platform as an expense. It will ask a founder, what is the bet? Because everything should be a bet. If you're spending money, if you're putting chips on the table, tell us what we're going to do. And so that's kind of like the what we want to bring is like, that's what a strategic finance partner does, is they're not just like adding in numbers and seeing if we're in and over budget, because but if you're like under budget, but you like missed all the bets you made, then it's still like a lose
yeah,
lose, right? And I think that's one of the things that like uh, even like larger enterprise forecasting solutions get wrong, is they're only ever there to tell you if you're over under. And our platform's there to really guide you to be like, no, what was the bet? Because what matters is whether the bet was right or wrong. And And so that's what gets us excited too, is like, as I think one thing too that we're excited to incorporate into the platform is kind of like a confidence interval around when you think about assumptions. We want a founder to be able to look at the future and say, okay, here are the things that we feel sure about because we have some sort of historical, some sort of like really powerful data to support it. Here are the ones that we feel like pretty good about. And then here are the assumptions that are like total just gut guesses, like we're kind of hoping it'll work out. Um, but kind of making sure that we empower that. It's like, it's all about the bet. What do you want to come from the money that you're spending?
I love it. Yeah. Where was this a couple of years ago? No, I'm just kidding. No, this is. I love what you're building. I always too. I've been known to, um, like a couple of years ago, more so when I was in the. I'm not in the SaaS space now, right? But like, um, I love looking at the different tools and reading these. Like, what are these people doing? I mean, immediately for this company, when I started this new company, I went out and brought on someone that had that like CFO expertise, like a really good bookkeeping company. Like things I didn't do early on at the last company that I wish I did. So what is your advice for let's let's talk about the people that are just starting their company today based on you've been at this now for over a year. What do you want them to know, these early stage founders just getting going, that you wish you knew when you were starting?
Yeah. So like our product aside, just like as far as them starting, um, I think that there's kind of like this, and it's a mistake that we've fallen into where we're like, okay, the product's like not good enough for this person to be in it yet. And as soon as it gets to this level, then we'll like add this person in. And so a lot of times what you'll have is you'll have like people telling you they're interested, and uh and so you're like excited. You're like, okay, as soon as the product gets here, then we'll let them in. But that like goalpost keeps moving, and so it's so easy to get in this trap of just like, you keep talking to people that are saying it's awesome, and you're like, I'll let you in it as soon as it gets to this point. So it's like the interest keeps increasing. Then you finally get to the point where you let them in, and you find out you're 6 months or 12 months behind what they actually need, or you might have just been completely wrong. And so I think like my advice to founders is like, get them in whatever version of your product, uh, like as soon as possible. Like our V1 of our product was literally a dashboard in G Sheets that said, this is your runway, this is your cash balance, this is your revenue. And then we had like kind of key assumptions. It's like, okay, anytime you want to go and make an edit, just go here. And that was like the V1 of the product. Like a customer paid 10K a year to have access to this G Sheet. And so like to me, it's like one of those things that it's like, get them in it as soon as you can, whatever version of that product is.
Uh, we need to have you come back on again in the near future. But I really enjoyed our conversation here today and learning more about what you're building and your advice, and wish you the best of luck. Let's definitely stay in touch. But I had a lot of fun chatting with you here today.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, dude. Take care.